Shadow in the exosphere. The year is 2093. Earth, suffocating under the weight of its own failures, watches the launch of its last great hope, Mission Omega-7. The planet is experiencing cascading ecological collapse. Governments have become mere shadows of what they once were, and the remaining population places its hopes in a pioneering space project aimed at colonizing exoplanets. The destination, Gliese 581c, a distant, promising world, but one shrouded in mystery and scientific speculation. The ship assigned to the mission, Pioneer's End, is a rudimentary colossus. Far from the elegance of science fiction, its structure resembles the earliest days of human space engineering. Raw metal, a fusion of recycled materials, cramped corridors, and analog systems that groan under pressure. Nothing about it offers comfort. It was built to survive the vacuum, not to embrace. Lieutenant Mara Ellison, acting commander, was a veteran of lunar missions. After losing part of her team in an unexplained accident on Titan, she buried herself in protocol as a shield against chaos. Cold, methodical, she distrusted anything that couldn't be quantified. Her leadership was respected, but never loved. On Earth, she lived in an isolated military shelter, running tactical simulations and reciting emergency procedures like mantras. She accepted the mission only to avoid the silence of her empty home. Dr. Kareem Youssef, systems engineer, was one of the foremost experts in analog artificial intelligence. He saw his family perish in a fire caused by security drones. Since then, he distrusted all forms of automation. He wouldn't even use smart toothbrushes. In his small apartment in Cairo, he maintained handwritten notebooks filled with obsessive calculations and diagrams of safe systems, completely non-digital. The mission was his redemption and revenge against technological failure. Dr. Elena Kovacs, data scientist and linguist, was considered a prodigy after deciphering a theoretical alien language generated by a quantum algorithm. She suffered from chronic sleep paralysis and claimed that something watched her since childhood. Raised among research institutions and psychiatric wards, the mission to Gliese was her chance to escape Earth and perhaps her own mind. She compulsively wrote in journals, sometimes in languages she didn't know. Captain Dorian Price, the military officer assigned to maintain order, had served in war zones during the post-collapse of Eastern Europe. After being captured and tortured by rebels, he spent years in psychological recovery. He developed an obsession with symbolism and religion after the trauma. At home, he collected relics from extinct religions and would spend hours in trance before statues. He saw the mission as a crusade, the final battle between the divine and the void. Marcus Venn, chief engineer, was obsessed with technological transcendence. He had been involved with philosophical groups that saw space as humanity's final rite of passage. He spent his days in underground labs attempting to transfer consciousness patterns to isolated cores. He spoke little but wrote dense texts blending science, mysticism, and nihilism. For him, the mission wasn't about survival, it was about transformation. Luca Romero, navigation technician, was the youngest. Raised in an underwater colony in the Pacific, he had always feared the dark. He used humor to mask his fears. He played old-school augmented reality video games and composed electronic music no one else wanted to hear. To him, the mission was an adventure, a way to escape the claustrophobic world he knew. But space would soon prove to be an even deeper darkness. Aline Zhang, biologist and terraformation expert, was an idealist. She saw the mission as a chance for humanity to start over. But she hid an addiction to sedatives that nearly disqualified her. In her private greenhouse, she cultivated extinct species and spoke to them as if they were her children. She carried a small vial of seeds from a symbolic plant called hope. She believed deeply that they could bloom on another world. Yuri Belov, the mission's physician and psychologist, was assigned to maintain the crew's mental health. But he himself had struggled with hallucinations since adolescence. He saw the mission as his final experiment. If he could keep the crew united, maybe he would find peace. He kept a journal of every dream he could remember. Lately, they all ended the same way, with the image of a closed eye weeping a dark tear. Year 2093. Earth, suffocating under the weight of its own failures, witnesses the launch of its last great hope, the Omega-7 mission. The planet is undergoing a chain of ecological collapses. Governments have become mere shadows of what they once were, and the remaining population places their faith in a pioneering space project aimed at colonizing exoplanets. The destination? Gliese 581c, a distant, promising world, yet shrouded in mystery and scientific speculation. The ship entrusted with the mission, Pioneer's End, is a rudimentary colossus. Far from the elegance of science fiction, its structure echoes the earliest days of human space engineering: raw metal, fusions of recycled materials, narrow corridors, and analog systems groaning under pressure. Nothing about it conveys comfort. It was built to survive the vacuum, not to welcome. Before departure, each crew member carried their own ghosts. When the automatic systems initiate the reanimation process, a subtle alarm echoes through the corridors. A silent alert, ignored by the primary systems. The 8 crew members wake. Disoriented, they struggle to recall even their names for a few minutes. Mara takes charge of the standard check protocol. But as they recount the names, a disturbing realization sets in. There are 9 cryosleep pods. The extra cryo module, according to the records, was never occupied. But it's covered in frost inside. The lid is slightly ajar. No body, only scratch marks on the inner metal. Strangely, no one remembers the extra pod. All swear that only 8 were assigned to the mission. The onboard logs are partially corrupted. The last 2 months of pre-launch data are missing. Kareem attempts recovery, but the main directory shows encryption errors. Meanwhile, small incidents begin to occur. The lighting fails in certain corridors. Sensors detect movement in sectors with no human presence. Muffled sounds, like soft footsteps, are heard during the night shift. Luca Romero is the first to report recurring dreams. He sees a figure standing beside his bed, a tall, thin being with a completely distorted face. Other crew members begin reporting similar experiences, shared nightmares. Romero disappears days later. The last camera footage shows him entering Corridor 7, quietly repeating, "He is waking up." The crew divides between those who believe in a rational explanation and those who sense something supernatural. Mara begins rigorous searches. Internal maps show doors that don't physically exist, while others are sealed shut from the inside. Elena finds a hidden directory called Aletheia in the corrupted files. With Kareem's help, she breaks through the first layer of encryption. They uncover voice recordings labeled Aletheia tests. The recordings include screams, sobs, and incoherent conversations. One phrase repeats, "The observer must remain unseen." Dorian Price suffers a mental breakdown. He begins writing in an unknown language. When confronted, he only responds, "He sees through me." He is found dead 2 days later. His eyes have been removed and carefully placed in front of a mirror. His facial expression is a permanent, forced smile. Next to the body, a recorder plays only a long, rhythmic breathing. Elena and Kareem dig deeper into the Aletheia files. They discover that before the official mission, an experiment had taken place using a cognitive dissonance agent, an entity born from collective suggestion, a being that exists because it is believed to exist. It fed on human perception, fear, confusion, paranoia. The project was terminated, but the entity was launched. Marcus Venn admits he participated in the operation. He knew something had been embedded in the ship, a watching presence, but he believed it was under control. Clearly, it wasn't. He snaps, locks himself in the auxiliary reactor, and deliberately overloads it. The systems begin to fail in a cascading collapse. The ship enters an unstable trajectory. Mara, Elena, and Kareem are the last ones left. They devise a desperate plan. Pilot the ship into distorts time and signal. Their goal is to break the observer's logic, destroy all symbolic elements of shared reality, logs, journals, physical memories, create a rupture in the mission's coherence. The entity reacts with fury. It takes forms, invades dreams, manipulates memories, imitates voices. Kareem sacrifices himself. He locks himself in the command module with the entity and redirects the ship into the collapse zone. Elena and Mara escape in an auxiliary module. They drift for days, catatonic, until rescued by an autonomous probe. But something is wrong. Internal footage of the pod shows two additional figures standing in the shadows, motionless, watching. The final intercepted transmission contains a coded whisper. Where there is mind, there will be observer. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this and comment for part 2. Interrupted Tales.